Jonah Creel learned early that silence was more valuable than loyalty. The harbor where he worked never slept, yet it never spoke. Cranes groaned, water slapped rusted steel, and containers moved like chess pieces in a game no outsider understood. Jonah was not a boss, not a soldier, not a legend. He was a counter. He counted time, weight, and absence. Every week, ships arrived under flags that meant nothing. Painted symbols promised trade, food, machinery, textiles. Inside some of those containers, hidden behind false walls and vacuum-sealed plastic, sat powders and pills worth more than the harbor itself. Jonah never opened them. Opening was for fools. His job was simpler. He made sure the wrong containers were never late. The organization running the harbor did not call itself a mafia. That word belonged to movies and arrests. They called themselves the Circle. No meetings, no slogans, no faces carved in stone. Instructions came folded into shipping manifests, disguised as routine corrections. A number changed here. A weight adjusted there. Those changes told Jonah everything. One container marked for delayed inspection meant bribes had already been paid. Another marked urgent meant a rival shipment had failed somewhere else. The drugs moved forward not through violence, but through patience. Speed attracted attention. Predictability invited audits. The Circle survived by being boring. Jonah remembered the first time he understood the scale. It was a rainy night when a clerk complained about a missing crate. The crate was small, barely noticeable. Jonah checked the logs and froze. The contents of that single crate were valued higher than the entire payroll of the port for a year. It vanished without alarms, without weapons drawn, without panic. That was the moment Jonah realized the world was being rewritten quietly. The harbor workers joked about ghosts. Containers that arrived heavier than listed. Shipments that never appeared in official records. Supervisors who retired early and moved inland. Jonah never laughed. Ghosts did not leave paper trails. This system did. Every layer protected the next. The dock workers knew nothing. The supervisors knew numbers only. The transport drivers saw sealed cargo and signed forms. No one ever saw the full path. The drugs traveled through legitimate arteries of global trade, riding the same routes as grain and electronics. Jonah once asked an old-timer named Harris how long this had been going on. Harris did not answer directly. He tapped the concrete beneath his boots and said the harbor was built with dirty money before Jonah was born. That was enough. Money flowed backward from the streets through invisible veins. Cash never touched the harbor. Value did. Favors, contracts, licenses, delays. The drugs moved forward. Influence moved backward. The Circle balanced both like a scale that never tipped. Law enforcement visited often. Inspections were loud and theatrical. Dogs barked. Flashlights swept metal walls. Jonah watched officers search the wrong containers every time. Intelligence always arrived late. Someone upstream ensured it. Arrests happened sometimes. Small ones. Expendable ones. The harbor itself remained untouched. One night, Jonah noticed a change. A new symbol on the manifest. Not a correction. A warning. It meant a route had burned overseas. Another port compromised. The Circle responded instantly. Shipments rerouted. Quantities split. Losses absorbed like rain into the ocean. This was the real secret. No single shipment mattered. No single person mattered. The system was designed for failure. Drugs were treated like data packets. If one path closed, 10 more opened. The harbor was just one node. Jonah felt both insignificant and essential. Replaceable, yet trusted. He knew enough that leaving was impossible. Knowing was the contract. At dawn, as a ship slipped out silently, Jonah watched the water close behind it. Inside that vessel were substances that would reshape neighborhoods, fuel wars, collapse families. Here, it was just cargo. The world believed crime looked violent and chaotic. The truth sat quietly on clipboards, in warehouses, inside systems built for trust. The harbor breathed normally. Commerce continued. Headlines focused elsewhere. Jonah turned back toward the office as the next ship arrived. The circle never slept. Neither did the trade. And this was only the beginning. Paper crowns and clean hands. Rafael Moreno wore tailored suits that smelled faintly of cedar and ink. His office sat 30 floors above the city, wrapped in glass that reflected the skyline like a promise. People believed money lived here. They believed power signed documents and shook hands. They believed crime was something loud and desperate, not something that filed quarterly reports. Rafael preferred those beliefs. They made his work invisible. He was not part of the harbor. He never saw containers or ships. His world was paper, numbers, and timing. He managed companies that did not exist for the purpose they claimed. Import firms that never imported. Charities that never helped. Investment groups that invested only in patience. Each entity had a clean history, audited and praised. Each one absorbed money that arrived dirty and released it washed. The money entered as fragments. Small transfers from restaurants, car dealerships, construction firms, online marketplaces. Nothing large enough to alarm regulators. Nothing frequent enough to form patterns. Rafael designed it that way. He understood that greed was loud but discipline was silent. Every morning, he reviewed ledgers like a priest reading confessions. Numbers told stories if you knew how to listen. A sudden spike in a coastal logistics firm meant a shipment landed safely. A dip in a retail chain meant seizures somewhere inland. Rafael adjusted flows accordingly. Money never panicked. It adapted. He answered to no one directly. Instructions arrived through law firms and consultants who believed they were serving wealthy clients seeking privacy. Rafael never corrected them. Secrecy thrived behind professionalism. Contracts replaced threats. Signatures replaced bullets. Once a month, he met with bankers over lunches that lasted just long enough to feel important. They spoke about market volatility, compliance, and future growth. Rafael nodded and smiled. He paid fees on time. He donated to causes they respected. Trust accumulated naturally. The brilliance of the system was its ordinariness. Nothing illegal on paper. Every transfer justified. Every tax paid. The drugs transformed into real estate, art, tech startups, and political donations. By the time the money reached the top, it no longer smelled like streets or blood. It smelled like success. Rafael remembered his early days, when he still felt tension signing certain documents. That feeling faded quickly. Morality dissolved under repetition. He was not selling substances. He was managing portfolios. Language mattered. There were risks. Audits arrived without warning. Journalists chased rumors. Regulators asked uncomfortable questions. Rafael prepared for all of it. Redundancy was his shield. Every company had a mirror. Every account had a shadow. If one collapsed, another expanded. Losses were absorbed without ripples. He once watched a news report about a massive drug bust. Tons seized. Arrests made. Politicians praised. The stock market did not move. Rafael closed the video and adjusted 3 accounts. The system compensated instantly. Seizures were calculated into forecasts. Failure was expected. Success was quiet. The real power was distance. Rafael never met dealers or smugglers. Violence never touched his world. If someone disappeared, it happened far away, filtered through reports stripped of names. His hands remained clean because they never touched anything real. Yet control brought isolation. Raphael trusted no one fully. Assistants rotated often. Conversations stayed shallow. Relationships required lies, and lies required maintenance. His apartment overlooked the city, but he rarely opened the windows. Sound carried unpredictably. One evening, a minor anomaly appeared. A foundation account moved funds out of sequence. Small, but unusual. Raphael traced it calmly. A regional operator had grown careless. Confidence bred mistakes. Raphael corrected the flow and marked the node for removal. No anger. No confrontation. The system would starve that branch quietly until it collapsed. This was governance, not cruelty. That was how Raphael justified it. The public believed organized crime looked like syndicates with names and rituals. Raphael knew the truth. Crime had merged with legitimacy so completely that separating them would collapse markets. Too many pensions, projects, and careers depended on the flow. The drug money did not sit outside society. It reinforced it. As night fell, city lights blinked on like circuitry. Raphael reviewed final numbers and locked his screen. Billions moved that day without a single siren. Influence shifted. Elections would feel it years later. Neighborhoods would change without understanding why. He adjusted his tie and left the office, another respectable executive heading home. Somewhere far away, substances crossed borders and streets changed hands. Here, value settled into accounts, calm and obedient. The harbor moved goods. The corridors moved power. And Raphael stood exactly where the two became untouchable. The corridor of shadows. Lena Vorst understood borders the way surgeons understood veins. Not as lines, but as pressure points. She had crossed more of them than she could remember, always legally, always with documents that never raised eyebrows. Passports aged like wine in her drawer, each one earned through favors and silence. She worked the corridor. That was the term whispered among logistics brokers and security consultants. The corridor was not a place. It was movement itself. Airports at dawn. Highways at night. Rail yards that hummed like insects. Lena coordinated what could not be seen as coordination. Her job was not to move drugs. That would have been crude. Her job was to move permission. Every shipment that passed through her routes looked ordinary. Medical supplies. Frozen food. Industrial chemicals. The trick was not hiding contraband, but embedding it inside systems that could not stop without collapsing themselves. Customs officials cleared cargo because hospitals needed it. Inspectors waved trucks through because factories waited on deadlines. Lena aligned urgency with necessity. She built relationships slowly. A supervisor at an inland checkpoint who needed his son placed in a university abroad. An aviation contractor struggling with debt. A regional official who wanted a quiet retirement. None of them were told the full truth. None of them needed to be. Lena traded solutions, not secrets. Communication never mentioned substances. Codes were unnecessary. Everything was procedural. Route adjustments. Documentation harmonization. Security optimization. If intercepted, every message could pass as corporate jargon. The corridor thrived on legitimacy. Lena tracked pressure constantly. Political shifts. Elections. New regulations. Border crises. Chaos created opportunity, but stability created volume. She preferred stability. Chaos drew attention. Once, a new scanning technology rolled out unexpectedly at a major airport. Shipments stalled. Panic rippled upstream. Lena responded within hours. Rerouted air freight to rail. Rail to river. River to road. The delay cost money, but no cargo was lost. Redundancy saved the corridor again. She never celebrated. Celebration implied completion. Nothing here was ever finished. Unlike others, Lena felt the human cost more sharply. She saw the endpoints during rare inspections. Neighborhoods hollowed out. Clinics overwhelmed. Faces older than their years. She compartmentalized it carefully. Empathy was acknowledged, then sealed away. Without that discipline, she would freeze. Law enforcement agencies believed they were hunting kingpins. Lena knew the mistake. There were no kings. Only functions. Arresting one coordinator changed nothing. Another slid into place. The corridor did not depend on identity. It depended on process. One night, during a storm delay at a regional airport, Lena watched officers inspect cargo under flickering lights. She recognized the signs of an honest team. Thorough. Unbribed. Dangerous. She adjusted calmly. Rerouted 3 future shipments away from that hub permanently. The corridor evolved. Honesty became irrelevant. She kept no trophies. No weapons. No dramatic escapes. Her power came from anticipation. She arrived early, left earlier, and never returned the same way twice. People remembered her as efficient, polite, forgettable. That was intentional. News broke one morning about coordinated international arrests. Ports raided. Accounts frozen. Commentators spoke of victory. Lena listened without reaction. Within days, new pathways emerged. Smaller. Quieter. Harder to trace. Enforcement pressure did not stop the trade. It refined it. The corridor fed into the harbor and the accounts seamlessly. Goods moved. Money settled. Influence spread. 3 layers of the same organism, each unaware of the full shape. That was the genius. No single mind held the whole map. Lena prepared an exit plan she would never use. She maintained documents for a life elsewhere. A coastal town. A different name. A quiet existence. She knew better than to believe in endings. People like her did not retire. They faded until replaced. As dawn broke over a border crossing, a convoy rolled through without pause. Paperwork aligned. Scanners cleared. Radios stayed silent. Another invisible success. The world imagined shadows as places where light failed. Lena knew the truth. Shadows existed because light was carefully positioned. The corridor remained open. And as long as borders pretended to be barriers instead of systems, the flow would continue, unnoticed, unstoppable, and profoundly ordinary. Breaking the invisible machine. The story of the trade is often told through faces that vanish and headlines that fade. What rarely gets told is that the system survives not because it is powerful, but because it is understood by too few. Jonah Creel counted silence at the harbor. Rafael Moreno engineered legitimacy from numbers. Lena Vorst bent movement itself into a tool. None of them were monsters. That is the most uncomfortable truth. The machine did not rely on cruelty alone. It relied on intelligence, patience, and society's own infrastructure. And that is where the lesson lives. The global drug economy does not thrive in darkness. It thrives in familiarity. It hides inside routines people trust. Shipping lanes built for food. Financial systems designed for growth. Borders created for safety. The same systems that sustain the modern world are exploited when oversight becomes optional and accountability becomes symbolic. Law enforcement failures are not always about lack of effort. They are often about fragmentation. Each agency sees only one layer. The dock. The bank. The checkpoint. The machine survives because knowledge stays divided. Real disruption does not come from dramatic raids alone. It comes from understanding systems as ecosystems. Ports connected to finance. Finance connected to policy. Policy connected to public demand. When pressure is applied at only one point, the system adapts. When pressure is applied everywhere, it weakens. There is no single villain to remove. There is no final arrest that ends it. Progress comes from transparency that cannot be rerouted, from technology paired with ethics, from cooperation that outpaces corruption. It comes from journalists who follow paper instead of faces. From regulators who understand logistics, not just law. From citizens who recognize that demand fuels every supply chain. Education matters more than fear. Awareness matters more than spectacle. The people inside the machine often believe they are too small to change it or too embedded to escape it. History shows otherwise. Systems evolve when incentives change. When silence becomes costly. When integrity is rewarded instead of punished. This story is not about admiring how crime succeeds. It is about recognizing how society can do better. The same intelligence used to hide harm can be used to prevent it. The same global connections can protect rather than exploit. The machine is not unstoppable. It is simply well designed. And well-designed systems can be redesigned. The moment enough people understand that, the trade loses its greatest advantage. Invisibility.